On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, we kick off a brand new season preview series called Best Case, Worst Case, with a little talk about Immanuel Quickley.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, August the 27th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us over on the Locked On Raptors Discord server, link in the description of the podcast. Great place to come hang out, talk ball in the summertime. Of course, it's not just basketball. We talk about food and video games and movies and the Jakob Poeltl trade and a great number of other things going on over there in the Discord. Come be part of our listener family. Again, free to join, link in the description of the podcast. Of course, you can find the show for free on all the apps of your choosing. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. You can join us on YouTube as well. Subscribe there, hit the notification bell, and you'll get a push notification every single time the show goes live or premieres. It's a beautiful thing. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time, and it's podcast time here on a Tuesday, back from a bit of a long weekend excursion for me. Just a couple shows last week. We'll be back to 3 this week, and then I think I might just start daily next week after Labor Day, because why not? My wife is a teacher. She'll be back at work. I have nothing to do all day, so I'll podcast, damn it. But now we're going to kick things off the 3-show week, beginning a series of shows we're going to do on all of the major players on the Toronto Raptors going into the season, called Best Case, Worst Case. And pretty simple. We're going to talk about the best case scenario for each guy on the Raptors going into this season. The worst case, what could befall them that would be terrible for the player, for the future of the Raptors, etc. And of course, we'll get to the most likely case as well, because it's usually somewhere in the middle. Here to kick things off with a talk about Immanuel Quickley and his best case and worst case for 2024-25 is our dear favorite. It's Katie Heindl from Basketball Feelings. Katie, what the hell's going on?
Not much, man. Just reveling in the old dog days of summer.
Yeah, when do the dog days end? You are, of course, the official almanac for when shorts weather starts, when the summer ends. Where are we at here, Farmer Katie?
I feel like the dog days are August to early September. But like you,
Okay.
I want to try and really hyper focus back to what feels like a regular routine for myself starting in September.
Mm-hmm.
Though we will probably have some of those very nice hot spells of weather in September,
Shorts in late September.
Yeah, shorts and a
thing.
crew neck, or shorts and a hoodie. It's kind of peak outfit.
I was at the cottage this past weekend. God, it felt like a whole summer because it was so relaxing. And the weather, you get those cool August nights where it's like, ooh, I'm going to throw a little hoodie on and wear some shorts and maybe some tall socks.
It's great.
Ooh, can't beat it, Katie. Cannot beat it. We'll talk about our attire of September as the month progresses and let y'all know what we're wearing, because that's what you come to this podcast for. Damn it! All right, let's actually get to the meat of today's show. We're talking about Immanuel Quickley. I think a pretty good place to start for this series of best case, worst case, because Immanuel Quickley is near and dear to my heart. I'm probably in the top 10 percentile of Immanuel Quickley believers. I think the best case scenario for him is perhaps more likely than a lot of people suggest for this coming season. So we're going to get into that. Katie, let's begin. For you, I mean, it's a bit of a weird sort of amorphous exercise I've asked you to do here and kind of define all the things that would make it a best case scenario. But for you, when you think about a season that you feel incredible about from Immanuel Quickley, the season's happened, you said, oh, that was the best possible way this could have gone. What are some of the things that have happened to make you say this once we get to the springtime?
I think he looks incredible in more of this, in the role that he was was more on ball, I would say, right? Is the role
Yeah,
that they want to have him in. Whereas like that was
definitely.
not how he played for the Knicks. And I know that was where some of the pain points happen in terms of disorganization. And maybe sometimes he looked a little bit like, I don't want to say confused or lost, but I think it was an adjustment. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think best case scenario is he looks extremely comfortable as the primary ball handler. He's really adapted, not just adapted into Darko's schemes, but they're building schemes for him. There's a lot
Mhm.
of fluidity. He is kind of nailing this quieter the quieter benefit to having him on the floor that I think guys like Grady Dick had pointed out last season, where it's just like he makes a lot of things possible
Yeah.
for them. Like he makes a lot of room and there's like a lot of space created and movement created in the fluidity that he has. So generally just like the offense is clicking, firing all cylinders, it's fast, it's fluid. Um, there's a lot of confidence. I think the confidence that probably has been lacking in terms of a primary ball handler for this
Mhm.
team, and that everybody knows where they should be because he's directing them on the floor in a maybe more gentle way that we've seen of point guards of the past, but very confident.
I like that. Like doing point guard stuff real well, I think is a pretty good way to summarize what the best case scenario looks like for Immanuel Quickley. I think
Mhm.
kind of diving more into sort of specific skills and micro skills. Like I think there's an element of carrying over some of what he did well for the Raptors last season and just kind of sustaining that. For example, the 3-point shooting. He shot 41% on the catch last year, 37 or 38% on his pull-ups, about equal volume on both ends of those things. Like if you could just keep doing that, incredible. That is one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA, considering the volume he brings to the table. And as you alluded to, the things that he opens up with that pull-up shooting threat,
Mhm.
I think he's got to lean into that a little bit more, right? Like I think I think the best case scenario here is he takes the guidance of Darko Rajakovic in the first few weeks after he arrived in Toronto, where he was just like, let it fly, dude, go have some fun, go bomb some threes. And he kind of ratchets that up even more. I think, last year he was around 7.5 threes attempted per game. If he can get up to like 9, that to me is like a best case outcome for his overall volume. Hell, if he wants to flirt with double digits, I'm not going to stop him. That would be pretty good for, I think, the Raptors offensive ecosystem. And I think that also will kind of lead into what I think is a really important part of the best case outcome for Quickley is the relationship on the court with Scotty Barnes and how those
Mhm.
guys continue to gel. We know it was a little bit iffy last year, the timing, the sort of, oh, okay, well, am I screening now? Or am I rolling here? Am I screening this way? Like they never got on the same page. They didn't have enough time to get on the same page. So I'm not too worried about it. But I think those guys figuring out how their skills coalesce with one another is going to be a big part of sort of getting the best case outcome for Immanuel Quickley. And then on top of that, I think, the carrying over the ball security stuff where he was basically prime Jose Calderon at not turning the ball over last season. Continuing to kind of learn the ins and outs of being a point guard. How does it look when he's sort of, seeing traps and defenses are bending to him because he's such a threat? How does he respond to that? Is he finding guys in the short roll? Is he breaking double teams? Is he, finding ways to kind of keep the offense moving even when the attention sort of becomes all about him?
Mhm.
In a way that I just don't think any opposing defense last year, Katie, cared to make it all about anyone because the team was terrible. And it was like, well, we can have an off night and just play normal defense and it's fine. And anything in there kind of interest you as far as sort of, little sort of micro factors that will indicate best case or worst case situation here for Quickley? I guess best case in this cut. We'll talk worst case in a second here, but any of those things kind of pop out to you that I just rattled off over the last very long monologue I went on?
Yeah, the relationship piece is a really big factor, and that's something I was thinking of, not just with Scotty Barnes, but I think the trifecta of Scotty and RJ Barrett and Quickley. And when
Mhm.
it was working so well enough that you would think that's what warranted this extension for Quickley and the contract and the real confidence that the front office has in him as being a mainstay, a cultural mainstay, team mainstay, rotational mainstay for the team. But I do think a lot of that hinges on those relationships, probably especially with Scotty Barnes.
Yeah.
RJ Barrett strikes me as someone, I know you'll get into him on another episode, so I won't steal any valor from that
Hell, it
person.
might be an episode with you,
It
Katie.
may
We'll see.
be. But he's kind of made a career of being a chameleon when he needs to. So I think he's probably more used to clicking. I think for last season, it was really the first time that Quickley was presented with the possibility of having a franchise on his shoulder, right? And leading a franchise and being part of the core. And I do think he stepped up into that as well as could be expected. So the relationship piece is going to be really important. And I think that's likely also what fans are going to look at, because things were pretty trepidatious, dicey, like last season, in terms of who we still had a little bit of a hangover of like who's getting along with who, like are people actually getting along, like what are we seeing versus and hearing versus what's actually happening behind closed doors. So I think the chemistry piece is really important. They have the chemistry, but yeah, like getting more comfortable with each other and how they're going to play together is going to be very critical, I think, to this best case scenario that we're talking about for Quickley.
Another thing I think is going to be a through line through all of this is a healthy Jakob Poeltl. Very important to everyone reaching their best case scenarios, because without him, the team kind of doesn't have any direction or plan or shape, and that's bad. A couple other quick things that I think would fall under the umbrella of, ooh, this season rocked. This was perfect from Quickley. This is exactly what you wanted to see. I think winning his minutes with and without Scotty Barnes. Can he like steady second units when he's being asked to play with the bench? I think that'll be a big thing. Even if they're just like losing by a bit and not getting absolutely railroaded like the bench did last year, that feels like a win to me. Is he like on the fringes of an East All-Star conversation? If all these things happen, he's probably in there. Does he make the team? I don't think that really, is the be-all end-all, but is he getting thrown out as like, oh, what about Quickley for that last spot or for an injury replacement? Like, I think that probably suggests he's checked a lot of these boxes we're talking about. And I think, all of that coming together, if by the end of the year you feel like Quickley can be like no worse than the third best player on a really good playoff team, the contract obviously hangs over him too. I think if that's the case, you start looking at the contract and saying $35 million a year. Okay, this is already maybe looking like a good value and maybe even a bargain. I think that's all on the table here in the best case possible outcome for Immanuel Quickley. But of course, there's a dark underbelly to all of this where things could go hilariously awry, as it has for the Toronto Raptors a few times in recent seasons. We're going to come back on the other side and get into what the bad outcome looks like here for Immanuel Quickley. What is the worst case possible for the 2024-25 version of IQ? We'll get to that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the single best place to buy tickets for the sporting events that you want to go to. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I tell you what, all week long, I've been keeping an eye on Sean Paul at Bud Stage on Wednesday night, seeing that those Game Time Picks are going to come through with a nice cheap pair of tickets so my wife and I can hop on the train and go watch Sean Paul and feel like we're 13 again. That is a thing I'm doing, and you can do it for all of the events you want to go to, whether it's a concert, a sporting event, theater show, comedy. It's all there for you. I use Game Time all the time to buy the tickets to the events I want to go to. I have multiple times this summer, and I've never been let down. You get the views from your seat. You get all-in pricing where you toggle the feature on to show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Make sure you turn that feature on, though, because sometimes you can get lost in the weeds there. Just press it on, and all of a sudden, no more worried about what the pricing is going to be. You get the full rate right up front. You get seat views, all that good stuff. Download the Game Time app, create an account. You just go LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Back at it here with Katie Heindl as we continue our chat about Immanuel Quickley's best case and worst case scenarios for the coming season. And now we got to dive into the stuff that's, we don't want to talk about this. It's upsetting to think about things going really poorly here for Immanuel Quickley. But Katie, ideally trying to just not make it the exact inverse of the first segment we had, what are some things that could happen this season with Quickley that you think would lead towards the worst case scenario where maybe a few months from now we're thinking, okay, 35 mil, maybe that was a little rich. Maybe this was not the best bet by the Toronto Raptors. What could happen with Quickley? What are you worried about? What are the sort of different areas that could lead to a worst case scenario here for IQ?
We do have to go a little inverse just because we don't have that much experience with him, right?
Totally true. Yeah.
The sample size is pretty limited. So I would say that for schematically, that stuff ought to work out for him to look as kind of confused or maybe reticent to step into that role. I don't really see that happening at all. I think for some reason there to be some confusion. Well, I guess the backup point guard, that was sort of that was a problem last season, right? Of like, who was the true backup? What was this 3-point guard string going to look like? And what are the options? And you and I have chatted through some of the new additions to the team, and we think, who showed up, whether it was like who showed up the most at Summer League, who the team seems to have their most trust in. So I think there's definitely more solid options than there were going into the summer. I would say even around the time that Quickley signed this contract.
Sure.
Which leads me to believe that the Raptors already knew they needed to shore up that role, because I think in this position for him to really thrive and succeed that we've laid out, he's really only going to be as good as his backup. So
He's got to have some insulation. Yeah. Can't be asking him to play 43 minutes a game and expect it to be great all the time.
And continuity, right? So it's not like he leaves the floor and things become a disastrous mess, or there's all that great movement that we're talking about just goes flat for however many minutes, because I think this is a team that you and I have also talked about before is really going to be dependent on its rhythm and momentum and keeping that up, like whether they can keep that up or just sort of flatline, and that would be really bad. And Quickley also does strike me as a real rhythm player, like rhythm style 100%. Player. So I think he needs that to thrive. He can come in and like kind of change the pace and switch it up, but if it's not there to begin with, this guy can't work miracles. So the centerpiece point that you mentioned with Bertle is also really important, because Quickley is not that big, and in terms of a guard, he's not that bullish, I think, just in his physical makeup. So he also needs an installation of size on the floor. And I think if he doesn't have that, he could get pushed around a little bit.
Yeah, like I think, there's a lot of different things, sort of, again, little micro skills, things like that if they go poorly, the size thing and the defense thing become a little more pronounced. If Quickley's making all these strides on offense and looks awesome, you can handle him being a slightly below average defender, right? But if the offense sputters, if the 3-point volume drops, or, we'll get to this in a sec, but like the rim pressure issues persist, then all of a sudden him being a pretty porous point of attack defender becomes more of a liability, because he's not making up that value on the other end. On the rim pressure thing, Katie, I think this is a pretty big pivot point for him. I feel good, not amazing, about the sort of upside of his rim pressure ability. Like, I think last year we saw finished at the rim with the Raptors above 70%. He really finished wonderfully around the rim when he got there, but we saw the issues, especially first when he came over. This got resolved a little bit as the season went along, as he got more comfortable, but picking up his dribble too early, not getting all the way into the teeth of the defense, like that, I think runs the risk, if he can't just get to the rim more frequently and use paint touches to either create for himself or others, it runs the risk of him becoming this sort of 3-point dependent guard who is pretty easy for defenses to scheme for, who doesn't help to lift those around him the way you want your table setting point guard to do. I think he has a ton of gravity and all sorts of ability to kind of affect the floor and make it easier for others. But if he can't get to the rim and he can't finish at the rim, or the floater doesn't come back, which is another thing I'm not so worried about, because his whole career he's been a floater magician, and it just kind of fell off with the Raptors last season. I think that's going to come back at least to somewhere around average for him. And but if he can't get to the rim enough, and he's sort of this sort of perimeter or 18-foot and out oriented player, that cuts into what his overall impact as a lead guard can be. And yeah, that'll be offset a little bit by the fact that Scotty Barnes is there too to carry some of the ball handling. And it's not going to be all on Quickley to create every single possession and sort of forge something from nothing every time down the floor. But certainly gets a lot easier for the Raptors if he's able to do that. And you can kind of have a two-headed monster as opposed to one guy who's kind of carrying the day and maybe not doing it so well. And you're kind of forced on this other guy who's now his situation's harder because the other guy he's supposed to be playing off of is not playing as effectively either. So that's very real and could, I think, contribute to a worst case situation for Quickley. Again, I think the floater will come back, and I think the scoring accuracy at the rim is encouraging enough. When you couple the fact that he's going to hopefully play more games with Jakob Poeltl, who is a really nice pick and roll partner for him. They seem to have really quick chemistry last season too. I think that should help matters there. As far as like, we talked about Poeltl's health. I think that's an obvious one. Is there like a skill among the other guys on the team that, you know, or just sort of like a development that could happen with them that you think could portend the worst case scenario for Quickley? I haven't one in mind, but I want to hear what you think.
Interesting question. Interesting framing.
I can put mine out there if you want. And then
I'm just like, what are the cataclysmic dominoes? Yeah, please go ahead.
Exactly. I think Scottie Barnes' 3-point shooting crashing back to like his first couple seasons would be kind of devastating for Quickley. I think it would really cramp the spacing of the floor. I think the just like the 2-man game between the two of them becomes that much less potent if no one's worried about Scottie pulling from 3, or they're eagerly letting him do it. I think that could be pretty rough. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Scottie, as like a catch and shoot guy last year, around 38%, I feel pretty good about that. And his eagerness to put them up, his confidence, like he thinks they're going in, which is half the battle. I'm not so worried about that, but if there is a big crash back to earth or beneath the earth for Scottie Barnes from 3, I think that makes Quickley's life a whole lot harder and thus makes the worst case scenario that much more likely.
Oh, okay. I hate to be like a pylon, but I think in this case too, mine also falls on Scottie Barnes. And that would
very important, Katie.
Yeah, he is. And that's by design, right? The team has done this, but I still wonder and worry about Scottie's willingness to go play outside of his role a little bit, and continue the expansion that we saw from him. I'd say it tapered off last season. It seemed like he wanted to be more of a one role style player. And I know that that's where the team is trying to go with him, but I don't think he can be there yet. And again, like, I think positionally, that cold shoulder, if you want to put it, if Scottie Barnes decides to go in that direction, would be pretty detrimental again to this trifecta we're talking about of Quickley and Barrett and Scottie Barnes. Yeah, like I know that seems a bit ethereal, but I just see if like Scottie Barnes is unwilling to kind of do these sort of intangible things, and it all falls on Quickley, where we've seen him be, phenomenal at, just given his speed and length. And, this guy is someone who he can fling his body and contort it to grab like a ball, like shooting out of bounds. And it seems like nothing to him, but Scottie Barnes has to be willing and able to do that kind of stuff too. Because I think that can get a little bit tiresome for one person to just take on all the time. Right. And to be that kind of like indefatigable force on the team. Basically Scottie Barnes has to have the same energy output as Immanuel Quickley does for this to work as best as it can.
100%. Like I think you would hope that the sort of proof of concept of Scottie being like a jack of all trades who can do a little bit of everything from last year carries over, and the whole sort of Scottie's a point guard thing goes away, because I do think that's kind of like a root of a lot of the concerns of, Scottie fancies himself a point guard. If he's not carrying that role, is he happy about it? And you would hope that the arrival of Quickley, who it seems like is a guy that they get along very well together and all of that. And again, the proof of concept that, oh no, Scottie Barnes, like you can do all of these very many things and be very good at all of them. It doesn't have to just be a one-track thing for you. You would hope that from last season carries over. I think it will, actually. Like I feel pretty good about this being a pretty like egalitarian team where everyone's kind of happy to do little bits of everything, because I think that's going to be required from them to be their best, right? It can't just be Quickley running every possession. Scottie's going to have to carry some of that too, but it's good. They're going to be at their best when it's kind of like you don't know where it's coming from and who it's coming from, and all of the sort of various skill sets blend to make it kind of an unpredictable offensive monster, which I think there's a real chance they can be. Like, I think there's a chance they're like an upper half offense this year if everything kind of falls into place. We're talking about worst case scenarios though. So we'll bring it back to that quick. Yeah. But yeah,
I kind of picked Quickley I don't know if this is a cop out, just because I didn't see a lot of worst case scenarios, and also because this summer he's one of the rare players on the roster who there's really not a lot. There hasn't been a lot of conversations around him, good or bad,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There was some kerfuffle around the time where he signed the contract. The
Mhm.
usual like, is this guy worth it? Debate, but otherwise, like there isn't, which I think bodes quite well because everyone is, if not high, then like pretty even about
Mhm.
Quickley. And I think that really speaks to not just his upside, but what we've seen from him so far. There really aren't a lot of negative attributes really that he carries with him as an athlete, or it seems like as a person, and certainly like a personality on the team.
And there's only so much the bottom can fall out of a guy who takes 8 threes a game and hits 40% of them and does it off the catch and off the bounce and
Mhm.
like does playmaking nice. Like there's like a pretty high bar there, um, kind of going in. So I feel pretty good
So I
about the worst
cheated.
case for Quickly not
Yeah.
happening. And yes, I'm glad that you started off with Quickly for this very reason as well. We're gonna come back on this side, talk about the most likely case. What do we actually think is gonna be the outcome here for Quickly? How are we feeling? Maybe predict some numbers. We'll do that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And yeah, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. For now, through September to the 22nd, all FanDuel customers give at $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If you're a football fan, this feels like a pretty good way to get your Sunday ticket going for this season. Again, just a $5 bet. You're probably watching and betting on these games anyway, so throw $5 down on a football game if you're choosing, if that's your thing, and you will get that the 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you're able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. That's a big thing. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on to download America's #1 sportsbook. Football season's coming, baby. Get that Sunday Ticket free trial for 3 weeks with a $5 bet. It's that simple. Back at it here, closing things out with Katie Heindl. A reminder, Locked in NBA, it should be your second listen of today when you're done here, as our guys over there do a great job covering the NBA 5 days a week throughout the summer, talking about all of the biggest stories throughout the league. And yeah, it's not like loaded with stories this time of year, but there's stuff, and they do a great job of finding interesting stuff to talk about. I think we'll probably talk about the GM survey that came out over at ESPN this week at some point as well. So go check out Locked in NBA, a great place to get your NBA fix every single day, even through the dog days of summer. All right, Katie, let's close it out with a look at the most likely thing to happen for Quickley this year. What's the most likely outcome? I tend to think on the sort of spectrum of worst case to best case, it's probably like 70 to 75, 80% closer to best case than worst case as far as what I'm predicting here. I'm curious where you come down. What are you looking at as sort of like the most likely outcome for Quickley in his first full season as a Toronto Raptor?
I think the most likely is really not that far off from what we laid out as best case, as you
Mm-hmm.
said. I think the like we always got to put a hefty dose of salt on the 3-point shooting predictions.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing this for years. um,
That's because we've had bad 3-point shooters, Katie.
that's
He's a
what I
good
mean.
one.
We're used to it, but like, I do think that will develop, but it's probably not going to skyrocket and go through the roof. But I think I'm quite heartened with the fact that like we've already seen like Quickley's been in the city for most of the summer,
Mm-hmm.
working out and training and like getting to work, if you want to say, a lot earlier than he really had to be. So that to me bodes well for everything that we've said. It means that he's serious. It means that he's taking the role seriously, the contract seriously, that he's trying to figure out himself before the team comes along, in training camp and all that, and he kind of gets situated with them. So I think the most likely outcome is him looking a lot more comfortable, confident, still really rangy and fun and energetic, but looking a lot more controlled with those things, like understanding what his levers are, when to kind of open something up and really let it rip, and when to take a back seat and, create space and create some opportunities for his teammates where they need them. It's more of like a give and go kind of guard.
Sure.
I think that would actually be a great best case for the season. Yes, improved 3-point shooting, and looking competent and I would say confident overall defensively. We don't need him to go like barreling in for every offensive rebound. We don't need him to be like he does take, I'd say like a fair amount of Lowry-esque charges.
Mhm.
So, we already have that baked in. But yeah, he doesn't need to completely change his DNA defensively, but to look willing to be as committed and involved, I'd say, or engaged rather, on that end of the
Mhm.
floor.
Being part of the string, and
Yes.
like there actually being a string to be part of would be a nice thing for this defense this year, which stringless last season entirely. It was Velcro shoes ass defense. I think for me, Katie, like my sort of prediction for what's going to happen with Quickly this year is 8 months from now, 10 months from now, we're all thinking, man, the Raptors were totally right to bet on this guy
Mhm.
in the OG Anunoby trade, to value him, to look around the league and say, that's the guard we want to pair with Scotty Barnes. I think this is going to be a season of vindication there. Look, the front office has done a lot of weird stuff in recent years, and part of it, I think, is maybe overdone and over criticized because it's, sort of human stuff that they've done, like trying to hang on to their guys after winning a championship and giving it all the chances they could have. Like, I get it,
Mhm.
right? But one thing we know for sure is that this franchise knows what like a point guard needs to be. They had Kyle Lowry, they had Fred VanVleet. I think they can evaluate that position pretty well. And I think if they chose to bet on Quickly, it's for a reason. And I think he's going to make good on that. I think the stuff for me, Katie, with the ball handling and the ball security, again, the ridiculous assist to turnover ratio, the ball security of just, something good is happening on this
Mhm.
possession when he has the ball in his hands. 6.8 assists to 1.8 turnovers last year with the Raptors. Extremely good stuff. Like, that is not stuff that just happens by accident. I think that is like an innate sort of point guard brain thing that you can't really teach. And I think that is going to bode really well. I expect he's going to learn how to navigate the, two to the ball situations. I think they have enough guys on this team in Pirtle and Scotty Barnes and Olynyk and Jonathan Mobo, even if he gets run, of guys who can, Bruce Brown too, who can be that outlet in short roll situations, who can make it easier on Quickly to make those decisions when he becomes the apple of the defense's eye. Like, I think that's all there for him.
Mhm.
We'll see. The rim frequency stuff, I think it'll tick up a little bit in terms of how often he gets there. Maybe there's a bit of regression in terms of accuracy with that. Maybe he's not 71%, but he's 67%. I think that's fine. I think he probably ends up above where he was last year in terms of threes per game with the Raptors at 7.6. Like, I think he's somewhere around 8.5. Again, if he gets over 9, oh my God, that's incredible. It's a lot to ask. I think you're probably looking at like 21 points, 6 boards, 7 or 8 assists. I think there's a chance he actually made this bold prediction on Locked On Fantasy Basketball a couple weeks ago with our pal Josh Lloyd, where I said Quickly's going to finish top 5 in the league in assists per game. And I didn't get laughed out of the room because Josh Lloyd's a believer too. That's why we love Josh Lloyd. I think the Scotty IQ pairing gets better. Is it fully figured out and optimized this season? That's a lot to ask, but I think they figure it out. And ultimately, I think we come to the end of the year and say, okay, like, this is a good call. IQ making $35 million a year can be a part of whatever the next really good Raptors team is.
Mhm.
I think that's going to happen here, Katie. I feel very good about it. Am I insane for feeling this optimistic about a thing with your Toronto Raptors in the year of our Lord 2024? I feel insane, but I do.
I'm muted for preemptive dog barking, but it might have
The
actually
dog
helped.
also believes in
You might have,
Quickly.
yeah,
It's
complimented
unbelievable.
what you're saying. No, I don't think you're crazy. As I said before, I think the best case is really not far off from actuality with
Mhm.
Quickly.
Yeah. Any parting shots here on Immanuel Quickley? Things you're looking forward to? Things that's with the first full season look at him. That's maybe you have your eye on.
I think, yeah, just you nailed it. Like the first full season, I picked him because he was someone I really loved watching play last year. He was such a bright spot in a very strange season.
Mhm.
I think, seeing someone's upside and like getting to see also an athlete sort of be traded to a team and take on a completely new role where they have an option to really thrive and become a different style of player. It doesn't really happen often in the NBA. And I do want to give Raptors credit for the freedom, it seems like, and autonomy they're really trusting him with. That also doesn't really happen a lot in the NBA. So that makes me really excited. I know he went through some tough personal things, toward the end of last season, which I
100%.
also think it's like important when people get, people process those things in different ways. And I think he's all he said is how happy he is to be here and how happy and sure he is that he wants to be on this team. And I think Toronto fans should really welcome that because, that doesn't always happen. And he just seems like a wonderful person. So again, I'm really rooting for him. And I have so much fun watching him play when he becomes like the strange go-go gadget, also cross between Roadrunner, kind of player. Like I love that style.
Inspector Gadget and the Roadrunner. I love it. It's perfect.
I love that style of basketball. And when it's controlled, it's like a real chef's kiss.
I love that. Just food for thought as we wrap up here. February 1st on last season, where the Raptors in February found a little bit of stability. And then after that, everyone got hurt or had horrible family tragedy befall them. And the team was not a basketball team. Really bad team context overall. Quickley, 34 minutes a game, 19.5 points, 5 boards, 7 assists, and shot 38% from deep, 84% from the line. Again, within a wretched team context where he was routinely passing to Jamias Ramsey. No shade against Jamias Ramsey, but come on. I think we're in for a lot of fun this year with Quickley, and I think a lot of the sort of quick doubt after the contract was handed out is going to be washed away roughly in the first month of the season or less because people will realize, oh yeah, paying $35 million a year to a guy who's this good and this fun, perfectly acceptable, and in fact, perhaps even good. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Katie, anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
No.
Subscribe to Back to Basketball Feelings. It's really good. Be a paid subscriber. I am. I like doing it. And that is my Katie promo for today. You can find me at Woodley Sean. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend on all your favorite podcast apps and YouTube. It's much appreciated when you support the show. However it is you choose to support the show. You can even leave comments on Spotify. Will I read them? Probably not, but you can do that. It makes me feel good and probably helps us with the charts and the algorithms and all that. So thanks in advance for doing that. We'll be back again tomorrow as we continue our best case, worst case situation with whomever my guests choose to talk about, because this is, a podcast of choice. I'm not going to thrust conversation points onto people. They're going to choose them damn selves. It'll probably be Vivek. Either way, we'll talk to you then. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Here.